my sunglasses at night so I can watch you weave then breathe the storylines. I wear my sunglasses at night so I can keep track of the visions in my
Uncle Lou here. Yep, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching, man. I really appreciate it also. And to continuing ACC week today, I know everyone's excited about these ACC videos. This is what, the fourth one? What have we done so far? Rank the coaches. Did we do that? Yeah. Can anybody in the ACC catch Clemson? We did a video on that. And then what did we do yesterday was top 10 offensive players in the ACC. I'll put a link up here somewhere to a playlist that has the other ACC videos in it in case there's one that you've missed and you want to check it out. I'll make it easy for you to find it. But we have another ACC video coming up right now. Okay, up today we're going to take a look at the biggest games in the ACC in 2019. I've sort of tried to narrow it down to like a top 5 type of situation, right? There's a lot of big games every single year within every conference. Don't have time in one video to really talk about them all. So I sort of found like a top 5 2019 ACC football games here. Now these are conference games, so I'm not going to be talking about like Texas A&M versus Clemson, Florida versus Miami, that kind of thing. I actually did a video back in May, the top non-conference games of the year. If you haven't seen that, I'll put a link and you can check it out. But I talk about games like Texas A&M and Clemson, Florida and Miami in that video. This is going to be ACC versus ACC conference games in 2019. The 5 biggest, or that I think might have the biggest impact on the outcome of the ACC, or that are just really, really interesting, or whatever. We'll get into that now. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and believe it or not, some of them are even watchable. This one, I'm going to be honest, it's about 50-50. You'll have to let me know in the comments section. Give this video a thumbs up if you don't mind. It doesn't cost you anything and it takes hardly any time at all, but it's a huge benefit to me and the way YouTube works. I hate to sound like I'm begging or whatever, and honestly I'm not begging, but go ahead and slap that thumbs up button if you don't mind. I would really appreciate it. All right, here we go. Trusty notes. Yeah, have to. Where do we want to start here? Well, we'll start with the beginning of college football season. Well, sort of the beginning, right? You got week 0 again this year, which is taking place on August 24th, the Saturday before really the season kicks off in full. And then Thursday night, you actually have an ACC game here. Georgia Tech on the road at Clemson. This one's August 29th, like I mentioned, a Thursday night. So the first ACC versus ACC game of the year. And this game will be the official launch or the official kickoff, the first game televised by the new ACC network, right? Of course, ESPN has had an SEC network for a while. Now they have an ACC network, which is great because now people can cry every time they lose to an ACC team. You have a built-in excuse. You can cry that the only reason the ACC beat you is because of ESPN bias and an ACC network, which is what you Big Ten morons have been doing about the SEC for the better part of the last 4 or 5 years. Now, do a lot of people expect this to be a good game, a close game, an interesting game, scoreboard-wise? No, and that's not why I have it on the list here. Clemson is a huge favorite in this game for obvious reasons, right? Defending national champions, 15-0 last year, looked dominating. Almost all of their offense returns, all of their skill position players, or starters at least, return with the exception of maybe like Hunter Renfrow. But no one feels sorry for Clemson when it comes to the wide receiver situation. See yesterday's video about the top 10 players in the ACC for more on that. So your first look at Clemson in 2019 as defending champion, and your first look at a new Georgia Tech team under new head coach brand new coaching staff, and most importantly and most interestingly, I think, to most people, a brand new offensive style and scheme. Paul Johnson gone at Georgia Tech, right? Been running the triple option circus, three-card Monty offense since he got there a decade ago. Had some success with it. Let's just be honest here. They fake won the ACC title in, 2009? Of course, they cheated to do it, so that got stripped away. But a lot of 8, 9-win seasons, a couple of big bowl games there under Paul Johnson, but not very consistent. I mean, they would miss a bowl game, then they'd win 8 or 9 games, then they'd almost win the division, then they'd win the division, then back to barely making a bowl game. But the biggest issue really with the triple option at Georgia Tech is it just hampered what you were able to do in recruiting. You see a lot of lower classification schools, and even some group of 5 schools, but mainly I'm talking FCS here, run the triple option. Why? Because they're not able to recruit elite offensive players that run pro style, spread, West Coast, anything like that, because most of those offensive players are going to the bigger classification schools. So the triple options sort of becomes a way for lower classification schools to run a productive offense with players that they're actually able to recruit, right? I mean, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma, Florida, name any of these teams, right? They're not going out and looking for quarterbacks in high school that are running the triple option, right? So Georgia Tech was able to recruit those guys, but the problem with that is while Paul Johnson was at Georgia Tech, Georgia's never been, the state of Georgia I'm talking about now, the state of Georgia has never been terrible for recruiting, but in the last 10 years, the state of Georgia has elevated to really national prominence when it comes to high school recruiting and college football. If you make any list of 4 or 5 states that are the best 4 or 5 states in America for high school football talent, Georgia's going to be somewhere on that list. Some states or some years they might rank second or third in terms of top recruits from that state, 4 or 5 some other years. But the point is, when you talk about hotbeds of college football recruiting, you're talking, of course, about Florida, Texas, and California always. And then Georgia is right there with those 3 big ones over the last 10 years. And because Georgia Tech runs the style of offense that they did under Paul Johnson, they missed out potentially on a ton of big offensive recruits that never even considered Georgia Tech because they did not want to run a triple option offense at the college level. Jeff Collins comes in, he's turning all that around. In the long run, that's great news, I think, if you're a Georgia Tech fan. Personally, even as somebody who only watched Georgia Tech play 3 or 4 games a year, usually on average, I got tired of seeing that thing. I really did. It looks old when you watch it. No matter how fast the players are that Georgia Tech recruited to run that triple option, like, the quarterback or the wing backs and the A and the B and the C backs and all this stuff, no matter how fast those guys were that they recruited to play those positions, when you watch Georgia Tech play, it just always looked like a slow offense. And I just think that's because mentally you just equate that style of offense with something from the 70s and 80s. And it just got to the point where it wasn't fun to watch Georgia Tech play football anymore, in my opinion. And I know a lot of Georgia Tech fans personally in real life and through the channel here on YouTube, and the majority of them either felt the same way or were getting very close to feeling the same way. So Georgia Tech fans, I think, are excited to see this change here at head coach. That's the good news. Now, the bad news is I think it's going to take a couple of years for this really to show any positive effects on the field. Georgia Tech right now is a roster full of offensive players recruited and signed to run the triple option. Not a whole lot of offensive players on that team that can run the type of offense that Jeff Collins wants to run. That's what makes this first game interesting to me, Georgia Tech at Clemson. I don't think Georgia Tech will win. I don't think this will be a close game. But what is Jeff Collins going to do year one with this offense? Is he going to sort of force a square into a round hole and take these offensive players and make them run his style of offense 100%? Is he going to stay with some sort of option offense year one, since that's what the majority of his players know how to run? Or will it be some sort of weird hybrid combination, maybe a lot of RPO type stuff that he maybe can teach those option guys? It'll be interesting to see. But anyway, that's why this one makes the list here. Georgia Tech at Clemson, August 29th. All right, now this one is on the list for a totally different reason. This actually might be the best game in the ACC all year, at least one of the most important. Clemson at Syracuse. Syracuse, of course, led by Dino Babers, which, in case you've been living under a rock, is like my new favorite coach lately. I'm just really high on Dino Babers. I think he's done a great job at Syracuse, of course, winning 10 games last year. But besides that, though, you look at the last 2 years of Clemson football. Of course, 15-0 last year, so they ran through the ACC without a loss. The year before that, they only had one loss in the ACC. Who was that to? Syracuse. Where was that game played at? On the road at Syracuse. Where's this game being played? On the road at Syracuse. Look at last year. Syracuse comes to Death Valley. Almost beats Clemson. Really, I don't want to say Syracuse gave that game away, but they had a lead in that game. Trevor Lawrence went down. The backup came in. Syracuse had every opportunity to win that game, and they let it get away from them in the second half, which is a credit to Clemson, not necessarily a knock on Syracuse. Obviously, we saw by the end of the year, Clemson was by far the best team in college football. But the point is, when you look in the ACC, only one team's beat Clemson the last 2 years at Syracuse, and even last year when they went undefeated, Syracuse came very, very close. I think this will be a really, really good game. Like I said, I'm high on Syracuse and Dino Babers. Can they repeat their 10-win season from last year? I'm not sure. The problem was, and this is no one's fault, Syracuse won 10 games last year. Of course, they didn't play in the ACC title game because they're in the same division as Clemson. Clemson played Pitt in the ACC title game, a 6-win team at the time, or 7 wins, whatever it was. So Syracuse could be staring down the barrel of a similar situation this year where they end up being the second best team in the ACC, but sitting home on the first Saturday in December while some 7 or 8 win team plays Clemson in the ACC title game. But obviously, if you start talking about ACC matchups this year, I think you have to start with the Clemson and Syracuse in terms of the actual best games of the year. Georgia Tech and Clemson is on this list for a different reason. But Clemson and Syracuse, I think, is probably one of the best and one of the biggest games within the ACC this year. All right, for my third choice on this list, I actually included a set of 3 games. Let me just name the games off. It'll be obvious to you, I think, once I name the games why I lumped them together. But just because there are some Auburn and South Carolina fans that watch this channel, after I name the games off, I'll explain it on a 3rd grade level. All right, Virginia Tech at Miami. Virginia Tech at Virginia. Virginia at Miami. Basically, what I have here is the round robin of games, including Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Miami, right? They're all in the same division of the ACC, and almost everybody on planet Earth has picked one of these 3 teams to win that division in 2019. Of course, I mentioned previously Pittsburgh won it last year with 6 or 7 wins, but last year was an epically bad year for that side of the division. Of course, Miami fell off, then fired their coach, new one coming in. Virginia Tech lost to Old Dominion and sort of disappeared. Virginia actually had a pretty good season here last year. Anyway, I'm getting way off track. But anyway, Virginia Tech at Miami. This will be a good game. What is this, game 5 or 6? It's at Miami. Now, this is an advantage Miami has here in this round robin of games. They get both Virginia Tech and Virginia at home, as opposed to Virginia Tech, who has to play Miami and Virginia on the road. That gives Miami an advantage, and it gives Virginia Tech a disadvantage. I actually think the best out of these 3 teams might be Virginia. I actually mentioned, I think on the live show a couple of days ago, if I had to pick a winner of this division right now, I would probably pick Virginia. Now, of course, I have my official prediction videos coming up starting around July 15th, and I've got to nail something down by then. I think Miami will be much improved this year under Manny Diaz. Of course, first-year head coach there, replacing Mark Richt, the football Jesus, the $7 million a year youth pastor or whatever it was they were paying him down there. But these are 3 really good games, and these 3 games, in my opinion, will decide that side of the ACC. Virginia Tech at Miami on October 5, Virginia Tech at Virginia on November 29, so that's actually the last game of the season, and it could come down to that. And then Virginia at Miami on October 11. But I think that set of 3 games right there, huge in terms of who makes it out of that division to face probably Clemson in the ACC title game. All right, and I put a cape on and call me Captain Obvious here. I don't see how you can make a list of best or most important or most interesting or whatever games in the ACC in any given year without including this one, Miami at Florida State. Even last year when both of these 2 teams were basically forgettable and miserable and terrible and awful and embarrassing, it's still a game most of you watched if you're a diehard college football fan. I mean, these were two of the best programs in college football over the last 20 years or so, both sort of in the back seat right now in the ACC, looking to climb out of that. Florida State, of course, made a coaching change 2 seasons ago, going with Willie Taggart. So far, that's looking like a terrible idea. Haven't done very well. Miami, of course, just now makes a change to Manny Diaz. We'll see how he does year one starting this year. But Miami at Florida State on October 26th, right? Biggest rival in the ACC without question. And let's just be real, the winner of this game has a shot at something. Well, Florida State, well, yeah, maybe. Miami's got to win this game, I think. They won it last year for the first time in forever and a day. Now they got to play on the road this year, though, in Tallahassee. It won't be nearly as easy, I don't think. Honestly, I think Miami's just a better team. I'm not impressed with Willie Taggart. If I had to pick this one right now, I'd probably go with the Hurricanes. Luckily, I've got 6 or 7 weeks of football I can watch before that game actually comes around. But, I mean, come on, Miami versus Florida State. You knew this game was going to be on this list. All right, here's one that may sound out of left field when I name it, but let me explain. Miami on the road at North Carolina, September 7th, so week 2 of the college football season. Who in the hell cares about Miami on the road at UNC? Well, Uncle Lou cares. Why? Manny Diaz first ACC game. Starts out, Manny Diaz and Miami have an interesting start to the season. They open up October 24th, the week 0 deal with Florida, then a week off, then on the road at North Carolina. North Carolina, a terrible team last year, 2-9, but they bring in Mac Brown. So Miami fans, and this is something, I mean, you see this all the time. It just happens to be Miami fans are guilty of it right now. Miami fans look at this game. They tell me all offseason, I've heard it a million times. They look at this game and they say, Lou, North Carolina has no chance. They were terrible last year. I agree that they were terrible last year. But guess what? So were you. So, I mean, you know, Miami fan thinks they can go from being an average middle-of-the-road team last year to competing for a playoff spot this year. Then why can't you apply that same logic elsewhere? Not that... I mean, I get it. It's North Carolina. Anyway, why this game, though? Miami at UNC. Well, Mac Brown's home debut here. And this is an interesting coaching matchup, Mac Brown versus Manny Diaz. Both first-year coaches at their current school. Both have not been a head coach in at least the last 4 or 5 years. In the case of Manny Diaz, never been a head coach. You guys know what I'm saying. Mac Brown, head coach at North Carolina way back when, then spent a lot of time at Texas, and then quit / got fired / retired, hid in the broadcast booth for a bunch of years. North Carolina brings him back home to try to resurrect that dumpster fire of a program. So he's back to coaching now at North Carolina. Manny Diaz, longtime assistant at Miami. Actually, Manny Diaz was a defensive coordinator under Mac Brown years ago. So a relationship here between these two coaches. But anyway, so first ACC game for Manny Diaz. First true road game for Manny Diaz because the Florida game was a neutral site game. And homecoming for Mac Brown, his first home game at North Carolina. I mean, take this for what it's worth. However loud a North Carolina crowd can get, I don't know, it will be that loud for this game. The fans are excited to see Mac Brown. There's several North Carolina fans on this channel. Been hearing from them all offseason. I think North Carolina is going to have a really good team this year. We'll see. Will they be better than last year? They have to be. They won 2 games last year. Can they compete with Miami? They shouldn't be able to compete with Miami. And this is a benchmark game here, all right? Now, look, Miami destroyed North Carolina last year, but everybody did. But Miami lost to teams like Duke last year. So let's say Miami loses to Florida, which is a possibility. Miami could lose to Florida and still be a really good team. And you'll find that out here when they play at North Carolina. If Miami loses by 7 or 8 points, 10 points even to Florida, then goes on the road to North Carolina and loses again or wins by 3 or 4, you're going to have to start reevaluating your expectations for the season. If Miami loses a close one to Florida but then goes on the road at North Carolina and blows them out again, you have some positive momentum heading into the rest of your season. So that's it. So Georgia Tech at Clemson, Clemson at Syracuse, Miami at Florida State, Miami at UNC, and then the 3-game round robin on that side of the division with Virginia Tech at Miami, Virginia Tech at Virginia, and Virginia at Miami. To me, those are the best / most important / most exciting / most interesting games within the ACC in 2019. What team, if you're a fan of an ACC team, let me know down below which conference games are the biggest to you this year, or which conference games excite you the most. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you again real soon.
Wear my sunglasses at night so I can watch you weave then breathe the storyline.